Jesus Christ, people. Jesus. I can't believe it. Everybody sit down. Come on, sit down. I don't need a ticket for no event that Glenn Fisher's putting on. Sit down. Jesus. Jesus Christ. Oh, I'm contractually obliged to appear at every performance that Glenn Fisher puts on. My God. Oh, I'm so angry. I'm so angry. But I'm also full of the power of coffee tonight. And I can't believe how excited I am to be here with all of you. You look beautiful. Is my mustache all right? Because I've been trying some different shaving equipment recently, and it's very difficult to keep it looking so fine. Now, I need to have a quick show of hands with you all here. Show me your hand if you got a mobile phone. Who's got a mobile phone in here? I heard about these smartphones. Great, great. If you got a mobile, keep your hand up. Come on. Bit of fucking energy. What's going on? Listen, if you got a mobile phone, who knows here? Keep your hand up if you know how to take a selfie. Looks like most people do. He was worried there. He's thinking, I don't know. Listen, I want you to stand up. Everybody stand up. Everybody stand up. Ben Traynor wants to stand up, definitely. He loves this. Okay, turn away from me. Look to the back of the room. Look to the back of the room. Come on, this is how you take a selfie. Get your phone out. Get it in front of you. Get your beautiful face, and I can see some beautiful faces here tonight. Michael's face is so beautiful. I love seeing Michael's face. That Steve Fallon guy, his face, he's so nice. Graham's beard is so beautiful. Now, you can see your own face. That's beautiful, but can you see my face? If I stand here, can you see me? You got me in the picture because I'm going to give you something so valuable tonight. You're going to be amazed. On the count of 3, and I want you to all count with me. Okay, I'll stay here. On the count of 3, I want you to take a selfie. Okay, together? 1. No, come on, say 1, you people, what they're doing. 1, 2, 3. Brilliant. Has everybody got the selfie now? Put that on the fucking internet. Let's make this big. I tell you why, though. It's not just for my own manic obsession with myself. The truth is, I've just given you something so utterly valuable. It's going to blow your mind. It's going to blow your people. I've just given you a moment that you're going to share. You're going to share with your family, your friends, where you met a ninja copywriting guru. And not just a ninja. You met a ninja guru expert level copywriter. Probably the best copywriter in the world. Okay? I'm so good at copywriting, my average refund rate is 136%. I'm so proud of that figure. It means, sorry about my shaving there, it means that I give so much value to people that they give me more value back. I'm so proud of that figure, 133%. That's how good I am. Now, most of you here will only ever dream of being ninja guru expert status. Most of you, none of you will achieve it. That's impossible. Only I will achieve that. But some of you might dream. And hopefully if you do, then you will understand the powers that I hold. Because I'm one of the most exclusive copywriters around. I hear about people. I hear about this Dickie Branson guy. He owns all these things, and he puts on exclusive events on this Necker Island, okay? Exclusive. Bullshit. I heard people attend these events. What kind of exclusivity is that? I rented out an entire traffic island in Swindon for 36 hours, and not one person came. That's how exclusive my events are. I would be embarrassed, frankly. This is probably the least exclusive appearance I've ever made. But I do it because I'm contractually obliged to ruin Glenn Fisher's life and make things very difficult for him. So that's why I'm here. But now you've got that picture, okay? And I can't stop. If you think I'm here all night, I can't stop long. I'm going to meet my friend Jay just across the way. He's my networking guru. And he's going to teach me this handshake. This handshake's so secret, so powerful, that if you go to a networking event and you shake just one person's hand, you will be able to download all of the personal details of the entire networking event. You can get their email address so you can spam the shit out of them. You can get their birthday so you can send personalized emails that makes you look like you give a shit when it's their birthday, but you don't really. And you can do this without any form of GDPR ever catching you. It's brilliant. It's the most powerful handshake, and that's the kind of people I play with. I don't stay around and hang around with no Glenn Fishers. But I did promise that, I promised myself, I wouldn't promise that fuck or anything. I promised myself I would give you one piece, just one piece of deep level ninja guru expert status copywriting advice. Because I know Glenn and this Rory guy are going to probably be talking a lot about creativity. And I know there's a lot of people here who have ideas about creativity that aren't necessarily true and accurate. Some people think it's about taking fucking risks. That's not what creativity is about. Some people think it's about sharing. There's this guy, Steve Furlong. He's all about being community-based. That's not what creativity is. Creativity is not that. This Glenn Fisher guy, he's going to tell you probably that it's about authenticity. Authenticity. Bullshit. This Glenn Fisher is a dangerous man. It is not about authenticity. The key to creativity, if you want to be creative in your lives and even try and get to the guru status, remember, you won't get to ninja, copywriter, guru, expert, but if you want to try and be good, the key to creativity, and this is going to blow you, okay? This is going to blow you. It's going to be like a truth bomb in your mind. So write it down, or get someone else to write it down, and then tell them to follow you around forever, because this is so important. It's going to change things for you. It's going to change things. Praise the copy. Listen, if you want to be creative, you've got to be creative, okay? Because if you're not creative, when you're trying to be creative, you're not going to be creative, are you? That's the problem. Think about that. Think about it, Vikki. I can see you taking it on board. I can see Sky Copy finally stop emailing me to ask me to come back. It's going to be beautiful. Use that idea. I'm now sweating into my own eye. Break the fourth wall there for a second, because I can't actually see. It's going to be so powerful. So look, I got to go. I can't hang around. Vikki Ross, I've identified who you are. She's going to take care of you now. She's going to introduce this podcast thing that this guy Glenn has organized. So please give a warm hand for Vikki Ross entering the stage. I'll see you again soon. Goodbye. Praise the copy.
I know it's a bit diva, but I have to hold a microphone for the recording. Of course, you can all hear me. Was anyone else expecting that? Cool. So he asked me to open and get you all excited about the night, but I don't know. Are we excited or a bit freaked out, or do we want to stay? I think for hygiene reasons, I have to tell you things like where the exit and the toilets are. I might go and hide in the toilet after. It's just straight across. The exit is through a lift that someone like a robot has to operate. So to hype you all up, I thought I would tell you some jokes. Disclaimer, I'm not a comedian, and apparently neither are any of the copywriters in the room or in the world, because I did that really creative thing where I Googled copywriter jokes, and this is what came up. Are you ready? So, clearly don't need a pen right now. The past, the present, and the future walk into a bar. It was tense. You're all nodding like... I've heard that shit before. I'll never date another apostrophe. The last one was too possessive. I know. When I was a kid, my teacher looked at me and said, "Name 2 pronouns." I said, "Who, me?" Yeah, all right. Okay, so I'm Vikki. I'm a copywriter, so I'm a huge fan of Glenn and his All Good Copy podcast. I'm an even bigger fan of his guest Rory tonight, and it's thanks to Rory that we are here. I am keeping count of how many favours I ask you for, and I do owe you, so thank you to Rory. What else do I need to tell you? Oh yes, I need to tell you about All Good Copy. So the first podcast was about a year ago, so Glenn is celebrating 1 year of All Good Copy. The podcast, he's had 22 episodes so far, each with a couple of thousand listens, and the special guests have included big names like Cindy Gallop, Claire Barry, Nathalie Gordon, Jane Evans, and Ryan Wallman. And next up is Trevor Robinson, OBE. But tonight, for the first time, the All Good Copy podcast is live with special guest Rory Sutherland and his host Glenn Fisher.
look at this. Look at this. Music and everything. Thank you very much, Vikki. How long is this song? It's usually like a minute on the podcast, so I don't have these problems. Thank you so much. I start every podcast by thanking the previous guest and thanking you all for listening, and I know a lot of you already do. So thank you so much to every single one of you for being here. It is so appreciated. I will also start this podcast by thanking people. There's a few people to thank. I need to thank David Hutchison, who's recording this for us so that other people who aren't fortunate to be here can listen to it. So thank you, David. I need to thank the wonderful Vikki Ross, who we would not be here without. When I said I was thinking about doing this live, she was enormously helpful in making it happen. So thank you, Vikki. Can we have a round of applause, please, for Vikki? I met Vikki about 3 years ago, just on the cut, and she has been incredibly supportive. I know all of you kind of know this because it's Vikki Ross. It's like the queen of copywriting. But it's been fantastic, and she's so helpful with so many things. And make her put up with certain weird things that might be happening tonight. I don't know. But yeah, so thank you to, and also thank you to Anna, who works with Rory, who has been obscenely helpful in making this happen as well. So thank you to all those people. It is an absolute honor, and like, hopefully, using my copywriting skills, I have given a tone off that I'm an authentic, nice person, and I'm grateful for all of the love that I get shown on Twitter and online and all this stuff, because it's very much genuine. I sit there currently in my small beach hut on the east coast of England, freezing my ass off in a flooded community that actually you have to be out by the end of December in case it floods. Luckily, we think we will be. But I sit there and it's so wonderful, and like Ruth is just like, what's going on? Why are these people being nice? I go, because people are nice. So it is incredibly grateful for that. And I'm genuinely honored to be in this room, where I was kind of walking, I was coming down today and I was trying to figure out, how do I introduce the show? I had an idea for an intro, which you might have just seen, I'm not sure. But I kind of focused on that, and then I thought, well, I need to do the next bit. What do I say? And then I suddenly thought, as I was walking to sea containers, I thought, well, I started writing copy here, literally 4 floors down on the 7th floor. I think the maths work. It was 7th floor. Ben was there with me, and I met Ben at that time, and I literally started writing copy in this building. So it's an absolute honor to be there. Ironically now, it's Ogilvy headquarters in the UK. It's Ogilvy. I mean, it's Ogilvy, isn't it? It's like, you don't need anything. When Vikki said, oh, we could do it at Ogilvy, I'm like, fuck off, what are you talking about, Ogilvy? So it's brilliant, and it's a genuine honor. So I just want to say and take this opportunity, and hopefully tonight, I've already spoken to some of you, but have a drink behind the bar as well, or whatever, afterwards. Anyone who can stay around, I know Graham might need to sneak off. If anybody else does, I'll take that as an offense. But yeah, I hope to get to know you. Every conversation I see online, and the best piece about like doing the podcast is getting to talk to people, and it's wonderful. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you also to Rory Sutherland, who is my wonderful guest. I thought, I was reading the book, going over pieces today on the train, and then I thought, shall I write an introduction for Rory Sutherland? I thought, there's no fucking point. It's Rory fucking Sutherland, the vice chairman of Ogilvy. He doesn't need an introduction, but he does need a round of applause as we welcome him to the stage.
Oh my goodness, thank you.
You sit there, Rory. You sit there.
Oh
no, it's fine. We're not selling any books, Vikki. Stop trying to. Oh, Rory is.
Oh, I see, okay.
No, we've already sold them all.
Oh,
we've already sold
well,
them.
Don't worry
about that.
Fantastic.
Beautiful people bought the books. That's a good point, actually.
Thank you very much.
The people who did buy the books, come and see me afterwards, and I'll sort you out. Thank you so much. We've got to do a podcast now, which is weird. I feel out of body a little bit. We decided, can everybody hear us okay in the room? Good, because we thought we'd dump mics and not bother with that. So we're just going to talk and interview Rory. So this is my little notepad that I use for all of my clients, and like, it's got everything in it, and it's got my questions for you, Rory. So let's have a podcast, and then let's listen live to a podcast that is being recorded live. It's actually happening. I feel as though I need something else. Anyway, let's start. I wanted to ask you, Rory, do you still live in Napoleon III's house? And if you do, has it required much decorating since you moved out?
Well, I'd be interested to know your view on this. The only thing I have done recently is a new bathroom. And after a long negotiation with my wife, she finally agreed to a Japanese-style toilet.
Ah.
Now, I don't know,
how much was
Japan
it?
For a time.
Do you mind me asking?
I got the cheapest one, which is about £1,000.
Okay, that's affordable.
Now, I didn't go for the heated seat because I'm a Protestant and I believe that suffering is good for the soul. You know. So I thought the heated seat was overdoing things a bit. Weirdly, by the way, do you know why Japanese toilets mostly have heated seats? I didn't realise this. Most Japanese homes don't have central heating, which is kind of weird. And so they actually have storage heating, and of course, because it's electric, you tend not to have it in the bathroom. So your bathroom's actually disproportionately freezing in the winter.
It would be quite hard if you were kneeling down.
It's a bit of a plus. So I did get that, and actually, I connected it to Bluetooth, my toilet, yesterday, and had to upgrade the firmware, which I thought was rather fun. And needless to say, I made the mistake of posting that to Twitter, which meant there were about 200 toilet-related jokes about you better check your log file.
Yeah, no, it's
that went on for pages and pages and pages. But have you done the same thing?
I would love. We've just bought a new house. I was telling
Yeah.
Rory before. We just got back from Japan, and I was very wary of the toilet situation.
Yeah.
I could see the fun of it. I could see the thing, but with the various sprays, the heating, I feel like the heating is one of the main fun elements.
The remote control strikes me.
But the
as
remote control,
gratuitous.
the best bit about it was where if you can have a flushing sound or music playing should you be struggling somewhat. Which Ruth came out going, oh my God, there's music in there. And I was like, why is that? And I was like, because if you're struggling, you can cover the sound.
There's actually a device called, because I researched this a lot, for the benefit of all you toilet gaijin out there. There's a thing, it's called Toilet Princess, which is apparently an incredibly clever play on words, because the word toilet princess in Japanese is also strangely sounds like the name of a real princess. Okay, in mythology. Okay, you'll just have to trust me on this. But it actually just makes flushing sounds because it was an environmental thing that a lot of women were very demure about the sound of pissing, so would flush the toilet continually while they were actually micturating. Okay, and this was an extraordinary waste of water. So you actually have this sort of $50 device on the wall, and whenever you press it, it makes a loud flushing sound to cover the sound without using any water. So that's an intriguing
in answer to your
insight
question,
into Japanese
I would love
urination.
one, and I am I'm sat here in my mind, and this is a little inside to the podcast, where I'm constantly thinking, don't go down that alleyway, Glenn, and talk about that. But I was born, when I was born, I was very ill. I had a twisted bowel. My bowel was twisted. And they were feeding it, and the bowel was getting bigger and bigger and bigger. I can't believe I'm saying it's actually on film. Ruth will kill me for saying this. But it was getting bigger and bigger and bigger. They were operating it wouldn't work. I was essentially dying. But then they managed to fix it, and they folded it. So I have a very powerful bowel, which has knock-on effects in my life. And when I discovered these toilets, it was wonderful. Yeah, exactly. You can do the math. You can do the math.
Yeah, got it.
So yeah, so I'm very keen on getting the thing. Luckily, we've got a slightly cheaper house, so we've got a bit of money spare. So I will hopefully get one.
Bizarrely, was very cheap because this all came from a sort of behavioural science insight, which is that
there's a professional.
There's a surprise. When you choose houses, one of the things that bothers me a lot, okay, and this is a strange thing, is online people are forced to make a choice one dimension at a time, one criterion at a time. So if you look for flights, effectively the algorithm assumes that the first thing you care about is price. And if you look for railway journeys, it assumes that journey time is the most important thing. Okay. Now this actually bothers me because, strangely, by making choice more homogeneous between people, you actually make markets worse because they aggregate less intelligent information from the overall behavior of market actors than they would do if everybody made a choice in a different way. So in the old days, okay, the bad old days, some people bought a house because they saw one with a for sale sign. Some people went to an estate agent. Some people looked at a copy of Country Life. Some people might have asked their friends, do you know any houses for sale? And everybody came in a different context with kind of different criteria, imposed in a different order to find the house they wanted. When you straitjacket that process, it actually makes choice very monotonous. And my argument is it places architectural quality too low in your criterion. And go and try this, by the way. Go and look at, there are a few websites that change this. The modernhouse.net, if you're into modern architecture, is pretty fantastic. There are a few websites that focus specifically, I think that's called something, is it called Wow House or something? A bit of a play on Bauhaus. There are a few other places which are quite interesting. But basically, what happens is you put in place, you put in price range, you put number of bedrooms, you put things like, is it a flat or a house? Has it got a shed? Okay. And then you narrow it down to a manageable criterion of 20 or 30. Now, interestingly, the odds that anything architecturally interesting is in that last 20 is quite low. But if you reverse your criterion and say, let's just go for a much wider range of places to live, but let's put architecture high up, what you weirdly find is that the premium you pay for fantastic architecture when you buy residential housing is tiny. It's the cheapest way of buying art. So this, bear in mind, this is a Robert Adam house, okay? It's got capability brown gardens. Now, it's grade 1 listed, which effectively, I think there are 5,000 grade 1 listed properties in the UK, maybe 6. 4,000 of them are churches. Another 1,000 are things like Nilsson's Column and the Royal Opera House, which you can't really live in, not legally, okay? Which leaves you with about 1,500 to 2,000 grade 1 houses you can actually live in, okay? And my next door neighbour's an economist. I said, I don't understand why this place was so cheap, because we paid no premium over a 1990s building with apartments the same size, which is 300 yards away, okay? So it was £390,000 when I bought it. The modern 1990s places are actually slightly more expensive, weirdly. And my next door neighbour's an economist, and I said, I genuinely don't get this. What premium do you think we're paying for the actual artistry of the house, as distinct from location, floor space, number of bedrooms? And he said, I wondered about that. He said, I worked out it's somewhere between 0 and 2%. Now, if you think about it, okay, if you chose art the way we chose houses, and you went, I want something that's landscape format, 6 feet by 3, mostly blue with a bit of green in it, okay? I'd like it painted in France with a tree and a couple of cows. Right, okay. If everybody chose art like that, Picassos would be really cheap, wouldn't they, right? Because nobody'd ever find them. Yeah. Right? And so part of the reason I bought this place is literally, I just went, hold on, this is the cheapest way of buying art. You're effectively getting fantastic design and artistry. It also completely removes the problem of envy of other people. So occasionally you'll go and visit some hedge fund manager, you know, in his absolute multi-million-pound palace. And my wife will go when we leave, what did you think of the house? I thought the architecture was a bit shit, to be honest. So I'm in the attic. It's on the 2nd floor without an elevator, without a lift. Funnily enough, there's another copywriter who's done exactly the same thing. The guy who's the creative director of Leo Burnett, interestingly, has done exactly the same thing. And,
is it annoying
with
him being in the room?
There's something in there in the creative mind which is you never, you always piss with the brief, to an extent. You know what I mean? This is what I said in my book. You know, my wife sent me out. This was a terrible decision. My wife sent me out to buy a wide toaster, right, with a wide slot toaster, and I came back with a bread slicer because I said, no, we don't need a wider toaster. We need narrower bread. Now, the only problem was having a great big bloody circular saw in the house when we just had young children was a catastrophically bad decision. So the bread slicer is somewhere in a cupboard at the back of the kitchen. But no, it's always interesting to ask. Essentially, there's a little, I mean, Dave Trott, I think, understands this better than anybody else. Inside every copywriter, there's a bit of a game theorist, which is a little like the guy in Airplane who goes, no, that's exactly what they're expecting us to do. There's that inner perversity, which is we have, you know, a horror of convention, a horror of the obvious. And so every time you do anything, and sometimes, I'll admit this, by the way, sometimes it's costly and stupid, as with the bread slicer. You know, that perverse, sometimes actually what mainstream people do is pretty sensible and right. And always trying to rethink things can be burdensome for us and the people around us. But nonetheless, that Dave Trott thing of the horror of the obvious, which is if I solve a problem through conventional means, I've failed. Now, that's why we're both very valuable and a royal pain in the arse, I think, as a culture.
With regards to saying the idea that you've said you've gone out for the toaster, no, screw that.
No,
I'll
we
just
need
shave the
bread. Yeah.
That reminded me of something that I liked. One of the ideas that you speak about is that the opposite of a good idea can also be a good idea.
Yeah.
That seems, it feels like a kind of weird paradox in it, but it's not. It's a very simple idea, but it's very effective, but very difficult for people to understand. I've seen a lot of people speaking about it and not really understanding what you meant by that. I think it's very obvious, but could you explain a little bit about what you mean by that? Because I think it's very important.
Well, I'll give you an example, which is when we were selling broadband, the high-speed broadband, in other words, an upgrade from ADSL to fibre, we sold a bit more every time we put in a bit more information, a bit more jazzy information, a bit more in the way of brochures, colour. I mean, there's a limit to how many photographs you can have with broadband, to be honest, because you're selling an intangible good. But then, over time, it all started to tire. And, it's very interesting. I don't know if anybody else sells product. You must have found this with Sky. As a brilliant client of mine at BT once said, I said, why is this response rate dropping off a cliff? And she said, we've basically run out of the people who do things. We're now hitting the people who don't do things. And, broadly speaking, there's a percentage of the population who are looking. I mean, I always think America enjoys a huge advantage as an economy because the population is, if you're being kind, very adventurous and is always on the lookout of new, better things. If you're being unkind, highly credulous. In other words, there's a naive enthusiasm in the United States that they always believe that everything in life is capable of continual improvement, okay? Now, the UK market isn't that conservative, but there are a lot of people selling multi-channel TV, okay, where you kind of run out of people who are interested in doing anything differently. And so what I said, I might add to the huge annoyance of the creative people in the room, but it was a behavioural science thing, is, okay, we've tried more, let's try a lot less. And I said, actually, to a certain number of people, the idea, if you look at it simply mathematically, okay, you were getting 10 times the bandwidth for about 20% more money, okay? So you went from sort of, I don't know what it was, 5, 6, 7 megabits per second, isn't it? Yeah. To 50, 60, 70, okay? So massively faster, hugely faster up speed, and all you had to pay was another £5. And I said, actually, that looks like a no-brainer to a lot of people, right? 10 times the bandwidth, 20% more money, yeah, okay, that's a good exchange. I said, the very fact that, to certain people, the very fact that we're selling it is going to make them suspicious, because they're going to go, well, this sort of deal seems bloody obvious to me. So write a letter, don't enclose any letters, put it in a plain envelope, and make it seem like a fait accompli with a single paragraph, okay? And that worked monumentally better then. Because instead of making it a sales communication, you almost made it like an official communication, which just was almost a presumptive sell. It just said, we can offer you now for only another £4 a month. You can actually increase your bandwidth because your new cabinet's been upgraded. And then it was basically, for this, call this number, do this, out. Okay? There was no kind of drama around happy kids, enjoying educational opportunities through faster bandwidth. It was done as a kind of, kind of a no-brainer, because sometimes selling is counterproductive, and that's the weird thing. So it's a bit like, if you buy someone a pint, the way to do it is, yeah, I bought you a pint. Oh, thanks. Right, okay. It's not going, I bought you a pint. It's a very nice pint. I bought it. It's for you. Would you like the pint? Tell me what you think about the pint, because I bought it for you. People go, he's probably pissed in it or something, right? Okay. There's a trap. And so if you're doing something slightly generous, to some people, the way to actually sell it is on the kind of, well, you would, wouldn't you, basis. The more you actually put it. So I think there's always the case, and I think this is true, by the way. One of the miracles of free market capitalism is it comes up with more than one answer to the same question. And that's because depending on who you are, your temperament, your context, your circumstances, different people want to solve problems in different ways. I think I was talking to some people in government today, and I said, underpinning the idea of government and public services is the idea that it has to be the same for everybody. That someone, typically a civil servant, who's 4 or 5 removes from the person who experiences the service, decides what the optimal service is and lays down conditions to provide that. Now, if you had a ministry of vacuum cleaners, okay, you'd only have one kind of vacuum cleaner. Now, for whatever reason, as I said, in a weird way, there's the Henry, and then there's the Dyson. And they're both great solutions depending on almost what frame of mind you're in when you buy a vacuum cleaner. I mean, the Dyson fascinates me because I have to admit, it's always worth looking back on ourselves and going, what would you have been really terribly wrong at? if you've been asked the question at the wrong time. And I'll be absolutely frank, if Dyson had come to me and said, we're thinking of making a really fucking expensive vacuum cleaner, right? I would have gone, for God's sake, okay, if there's one thing that's a distressed purchase, it's the bloody vacuum cleaner, right? Okay, if there's one thing that's a grudge purchase which you only buy when your existing vacuum cleaner breaks or fails or burns out, that's it. The idea that you can actually premiumize that would have struck me as just entirely deranged as an idea. And yet my dad, who's quite stingy, right, has two, right? One for upstairs, one for down. Okay, what the hell's going on here, And so it is really strange. And I mean, that's why the book's called The Surprising Power of Ideas That Don't Make Sense. Now, why do we think that is? It might be that if you can turn a grudge purchase into an exciting purchase, you grudge it less. Now, this is just a total off-the-wall theory of mine, okay? And it came about when I was shopping for bedding with my wife. And, I've been sort of looking at, various sort of, duvet covers and pillows and pillowcases and stuff like that. And after about half an hour, I said to my wife, can I make you a deal? I said, can we spend one of two amounts in here? Can we spend either nothing or a lot? I was going, how does that make any sense? Surely there's an optimal amount in the middle, right? I said, well, no, because I'm kind of okay with our existing bedding. I don't get into bed, with a feeling of disgust, right? Okay, and I'm kind of chill with the bedding we've got already, okay? Now, if we don't buy any new bedding, I've saved 200 quid, and maybe I can sneak off and buy a drone or something, right? Okay. On the other hand, they said, if we spend 600 quid, now it gets interesting, because I can get wildly, nerdily excited about thread counts, Egyptian cotton, tog values, mattress toppers. Anybody got into this? It is actually worth it, okay? Bed perviness, okay? And the other weird one is the Oxford pillowcase, which is a wonderful psychological mystery, which is if you have a pillowcase with a pointless rim of cloth around the outside, okay, it's much nicer, isn't it?
Have you done any...
I don't know why, okay? Why is it nicer to have a squarey thing around the outside? And now, obviously, if you get into pillow fights, I'm a bit old for that kind of thing. I imagine it gives you a bit of extra purchase. But I don't think that's the reason. And so I said, look, okay, if I spend a lot of money, I can actually get excited about this. It's actually interesting. Whereas I had the same thing with KFC, where they had a product that wasn't selling, and I said, try putting the price up. And my theory was that I use the phrase, you don't get an endorphin rush from mid-market retail, do you? Right, okay? That's where M&S clothing really falls down, okay? In that you get a thrill from, anybody here TK Maxx, perv? Come on, yeah, exactly. it is the future, isn't it? Exactly. By the way, it's the most important, far more important than a Corbyn victory in terms of democratising Britain, is TK Maxx. Fair? Right? Because before TK Maxx, you could tell how rich people were from their clothes. And I didn't know TK Maxx had arrived in the UK. This is about the early 90s, I guess. I was going, why is not a taxi driver wearing an Armani jacket, right? Okay, don't get me wrong, taxi drivers earn a fair amount of money. It's not that weird that they have an Armani jacket. But you wouldn't think they wear it to go taxi driving in, right? And they did. And basically that was TK Maxx, which entirely took away that whole thing of, stratification of clothing. I mean, it's a fabulous thing.
Have you done any investigations into mattresses, just while we're on the bed?
No, well, that gets interesting, doesn't it? Because are you a bit of a Vice Spring
Well,
fan?
no, Ruth wants
Ooh,
she's become obsessed with the Premier Inn mattresses. Whatever mattresses they have in there are meant to be very good. And I'm just wondering if there's anything else I should be looking at.
Well, there are all these weird foam ones that are sold only on the internet, aren't they?
Yeah. By the way, this podcast is just for me.
Yeah,
no.
But no, I mean, it is. I mean, the interesting thing with that mid-market retail problem is that, in a sense, I think with KFC, you go there for a bargain or you go there for a treat, don't you? And this product was kind of a bit of a premium product, but it was kind of priced in the middle. And my argument was at the middle price, it wasn't doing any service as a treat. And it wasn't a bargain.
I just can't wait to see a £40 chicken wing next time I
no,
go to
exactly.
KFC. I've not seen it yet.
There's that wonderful
Maybe it's not
story,
got to
isn't there, about
Grimsby.
Elvis, who actually flew in the Lisa Marie to get a sandwich. Do you hear about this? Because he was hanging around with his crew in. There's actually someone, I think a journalist was on the plane. He was hanging out in Memphis or whatever at Gracelands, and they'd read about this place that did a $200 sandwich in Denver. So they all just called the airport and got on the plane and flew there. No, I mean, KFC could do a little bit of that. It'd be quite fun. But or the golden bucket would be quite nice.
That
wouldn't
would
it?
be good, actually.
But no, I think there's something interesting there, which is that the psychology, basically, economics has a very, very shallow idea of what motivates human beings. And one of the problems, and this is probably the biggest problem in corporate decision making, this is why actually copywriters serve a very, very important function. Because you're at a position to question default economic logic. I'll give you a nice example of where you could be really valuable, okay? I mean, I had a recent argument with Vodafone, one of our clients, because they have this unlimited tariff. And I said, are you sure that unlimited is the best thing to do? Because unlimited is very difficult to place a value on, whereas weirdly, if you said, okay, for £70 a month you get, I'm a bit behind with tariffs, I don't know what it is, 200 gigabytes, or is it? Yeah, a terabyte, okay. And then you said for an extra £5 you get 200 terabytes. That might have more wow factor than unlimited, okay? Or you call it the British Library tariff. And it basically means you can download the entire contents of the British Library every month, or whatever, okay? Because I always had this argument with Spotify. I said that unlimited, the problem with unlimited music is it's a bit like how much do you want to pay for a unicorn? No one really knows, okay? Whereas I said, if you actually put an artificial limit on it and said you can download up to 200 albums every month, people go, shit the bed, 200 albums would cost me £2,000. And I'm paying £15 a month to download £2,000 worth of music. Well, hey. Okay, whereas making something unlimited is a bit less concretized. Okay, so concretization is a great copywriter thing. You know, you're gonna really hate me for this. Trump was good at that. Okay, right? We're going to build a wall. It's not going to build a wall. Okay, right? No, it's not going to get the Mexicans to pay, but it's a concrete thing, right? It's actually physical and it's tangible, and we get what he's about. Okay, even if you don't like it. Whereas what Hillary would have said is, we'll engage in tripartite discussions with our Mexican and Canadian friends, okay? Which isn't the same as we're going to build a wall. And so, with Vodafone, I was arguing about this. I noticed that there's a weird problem now, for all the talk of free broadband, fibre optic broadband, it's not very well saying that, but if you write to people and say, you can have fibre optic broadband for the same price you're paying for ADSL, 50% of them, 60% of them still don't take it up. Okay, there's inertia, maybe there's suspicion. Now, what you can do as a copywriter is you can go, you're being very logical here, saying it's for the same price. Maybe you should make it £1, okay? Because this is where you can inject behavioral science into pricing and things that have been designed by economists. Because weirdly, if you pay us £1, you can have, there are lots and lots of cases where having a small charge for something just makes it feel somehow more exciting than making it free. I don't know if anybody's got an espresso subscription. Has anybody got that? But essentially, if you agree to buy a certain amount of coffee over 12 months, you've got to commit to basically a direct debit for 12 months for a certain amount of coffee every month. You've got 2 years to actually use up the balance, so you're not forced to be climbing up the walls. You get a machine for £1. And I think that's clever. I think it's much cleverer than free. And it's hard to explain why. But somehow the thrill you get going, I'm getting a 189 quid Virtuo plus whatever it is, and I'm paying £1, is just more TK Maxi than getting it for free, which tends to raise kind of where's the catch feeling.
Free is a very dangerous word.
It's kind of dangerous because it's brilliant and terrible.
Why is it free?
Yeah, why is it free?
The
natural assumption is it's never really free. And so, it's bloody clever, that Nespresso program, because by the time it comes, the machine, with 50 quid's worth of free coffee, okay? So by the time you actually need to buy some coffee, you've got something like a £90 credit balance in your account. So when you buy 50 quid's worth of coffee, it feels free again, okay? So they've got you paying 30 or 40 pounds a month, okay, for a machine that feels free and coffee which feels free because you've already paid for it. And so it's an extraordinary potent piece of behavioral kind of pain relief in terms of payment. And so I mean, one of the great things you can do as a copywriter is you can, now, too often what you'll do is you'll go to your client and they'll go, the decision wasn't taken in marketing at all. You know, our product people made this decision, as happened, I think, with Vodafone, and it's too late. And the other thing that's a great curse, by the way, is, do you notice this? Basically, this is the copywriter's curse. every time you suggest something to a client which requires that they go and talk to someone outside the Marcoms function, it never happens. Is that fair? Now, it's not just you. David Ogilvy complained about the same thing. He was asked to do a B2B campaign for a huge paper company in the United States. And he said, don't do an ad campaign, that'll be forgotten in 6 months. You own something like 1 million acres of woodland, I mean, some insane area of the United States, covered wood. Why don't you just donate 1 or 2% of that area as picnic land for the American public to enjoy themselves? And to, just donate it for public use. Because that'll be remembered for 100 years, and it'll cost less than an ad campaign. And it never happened, and of course those things never do, because they require a marketing person to go and talk outside the silo, and they never want to do that. And that always strikes me as a bit of a curse, but at least try. At least you can say you pushed back.
I was going to ask about that, in the sense that you're saying there with the Dyson thing, the idea that there are so many good ideas out there, but good ideas are subjective. You've been in this game for a long, long time.
Oh, I would have got so much wrong.
It's an impossible question, I realise, but it's always interesting to try and explore it. How have you navigated figuring out what might be a good idea and letting another idea drop away? You got it wrong with Dyson, but you've got it right with a lot of other things.
I mean, David Ogilvy, one of his most forgotten quotes, which I think is one of his best, is the best ideas arrive as jokes. And actually, if there's something slightly comical about your suggestion, then most conventional people view that as a weakness, and I think it's a strength. So, I mean, one of the ideas, one of the most brilliant bits of behavioral science in the telecoms industry, nothing to do with us, it was invented, I think, by a guy called Ed Carter at MCI years ago. Friends and family, okay? Now, if you think about it, you chose 10 routines, 10 numbers, and you got 10% off calls to those 10 numbers. And you had to choose the 10 numbers you call the most. Now, it was quite clever, because most people make 90% of their calls to the same 10 people. Right? It's not like social media, because on the phone, you know, it's obviously you have a much smaller circle of acquaintances. And but because it made you put the effort in, thinking, you know, shall I put so-and-so down, or what about that other person? And, ooh, I've got to have 2 international numbers, who will that be? Okay. Now, if you think about it, if BT had just reduced the cost of all phone calls by 10%, 3 months later, everybody would have forgotten about it and just been totally stuck on the new normal, okay? And what was brilliant is that, first of all, the great thing was, first of all, comedians made a huge amount about friends and family. You know, there was the comedian who did the whole routine about how it was 9 sex lines and his mum, okay? Because they were the most called numbers, all this sort of stuff. But the very fact that it was silly is, in most people's mind, is a reason to reject it. And in a copywriter's mind, should be a reason to think about it a bit more. Occasionally, you know, you can bring a... So one of the weird ones I did, which is, I think someone should take friends and family to tax. The concept of tax. So one of the points I made about tax is, tax cuts are really stupid. Whatever your politics, okay? Because 18 months later, people don't notice them anymore. If you had an annual tax rebate, okay, where you paid people back, you taxed people at the previous rate, but they got a lump sum, that's a completely different thing, perceptually. Now, to an economist, there's no distinction between those two conditions. But to a normal human being, they're massively different. I'd also argue, by the way, that it'd be a good thing socially, because giving people an annual lump sum is a good thing to do. It's good for people to have uneven salaries. Because when you suddenly get a bit more money, you think differently about what you do with it, okay? You know, a windfall, you don't spend in the same way that you spend your salary, do you? You go, I better do something kind of special with this, okay? And also, by the way, it gives people an opportunity to reinvent their lives. You know, if you get sort of double your monthly salary 1 month, then you actually go, you know, I really need to, I don't know, move house, whatever it might be. You can actually do something big with it, rather than something small.
Sorry, can I just...
Sorry, yeah, of course, yeah.
I've just got a call.
Oh.
Glenn, it's Tony Voice. I've been on the big idea case for 3 nights straight. Still no show. Friday I staked out the agency. Mostly hipsters coming and going. One guy stopped outside and looked like he was about to have a big idea. Turned out he was just vaping. Saturday I followed up on that lead you gave me on the freelancer. She spent most of the day making tea. Tapped a few times at her laptop, which I broke in and stole when she took the dog out. No luck though. If a big idea was there, it was well disguised. Sunday, the office of the business you mentioned was closed, but I managed to pick the lock and search the place. Mostly deadlines everywhere, and a whole lot of numbers on the wall. Monthly targets, quarterly sales plans, weird things like that. Nothing to do with ideas. The whole place looked panicked, hurried, even with no one there. I'll keep searching, but boy, it's a tough case to crack. These big ideas you're looking for are sure hard to find. But I'll be in touch when I've chased up a few more leads. Speak soon.
Sorry about that. I've hired someone to try and find some ideas for me, and it's not working out. I wondered, with regard to yourself, where do you look for ideas? I know that's quite a big, silly question, but where do you look for inspiration?
Well, I always jokingly describe this methodology of mine. I actually said this as a joke, which is you try and find somewhere in the process someone's assumed something that's perfectly sensible but wrong. Okay, if you can find out what the wrong assumption is, okay, you've now got an advantage, because if you can you can then redefine the problem. If you've redefined the problem, you can probably solve it. 9 times out of 10, if you can redefine a problem, it becomes easier to solve. And so I always look for what the assumption is, and you go, look, there are a whole load of logical things that people will automatically do. They'll assume that free is better than 1p, okay? And somewhere along the line, there are a few assumptions that are wrong. And by dint of everything being logical, we've probably made it boring. So if you think about it, the British Library tariff would be far more likely to get a stand-up comedian talking about it than an unlimited tariff. And so it's partly that weird shit that doesn't quite make sense, is highly salient to us. It's very noticeable, and because we notice it, it becomes more important. And that's a Robert Cialdini insight, that we don't pay attention to what's important. To some extent, we think important what we pay attention to. And logic, in a way, is a bit like water. It doesn't have a taste. And the things that give a communication a taste is that weird thing that you weren't expecting or that doesn't completely make sense. And so, I mean, having said this as a joke, is I always go, what would an economist think when presented with this, and what would they be wrong about? And I discovered only a week ago, when someone emailed me, that was kind of Disney's methodology. They always took a whole series of assumptions, and they said, let's kill one of them and see where it takes us. And so when he produced Fantasia, according to this guy I spoke to on a podcast, funnily enough, he wanted to get mist into the cinemas to make it more atmospheric. And they said, no, you can't do that. And he said, trouble is, I'm producing these fantastic films, but I've got no control over the environment in which they appear. What would my whole creation be like if it was 3D? And he said, well, patently you couldn't have the princesses next to the pirates or the mice next to the whatever. So you'd have to have them in a separate place. And from that, Disneyland effectively emerged. From his idea, which is what if cinema within 3 dimensions, which was all about basically getting rid of a constraint. And I think there's something there which is that genuinely that problems are there because everybody assumes something that ain't true. And so, you know, one of the things I always say to my younger colleagues, if you want to buy or rent a house in London, go and get a copy of the Tube map and find out what isn't on it. Okay. Now, this sounds really weird, because over time, Londoners have come to think that the Tube map is London. Okay. Now, actually, it's hugely biased towards North London. It creates utter delusion in people. First of all, people tend to think, because they look at the Tube map, that the further out you go, the longer your journey takes. Now, that's true on a tube. It's not true on a railway, because railways have fast trains. If you live in, now, all of you, because you're trendy hipster types, okay, I'd have to put a gun to your head to get you to move to Bromley, okay? Right, oh, so
Can I just
someone
clarify?
there who lives there. Okay, well done. Right, okay. But actually,
I am from Grimsby.
You know,
I mean, hipster.
But actually, Bromley is an extraordinary place, because from Bromley South you can get into central London in 15 minutes. It's like teleportation, right? You're out there by the M25, and 15 minutes later you're in Blackfriars or you're in Victoria. Now, tube people don't understand that. Doesn't make any sense. But they think that Fulham's central. Now, it takes much longer to get into work from Fulham. Fulham is so far fucking west, it should have its own time zone, in my opinion, right? But because it's on the tube, everybody goes, no, it's really central, right? Okay, it's not. It takes fucking ages, right? And so what I always say to people who are looking for housing is find out what everybody else thinks is true and find out what they're wrong about. And I mean, so I was telling this story, and someone actually came up to me and said that some friends of theirs had moved from Fulham to Herne Hill because they needed an extra bedroom because they'd had a kid. And they were utterly gutted, and they were expecting, basically, it wasn't on the tube and it had Hill in the name, okay? So they were basically preparing themselves for deliverance, pretty much, okay? And they were completely bemused on their first day at work because they discovered their journey time was half what it was before. And they were kind of going, does not compute. And so that business of basically, this is what makes us annoying, and this is why, in fairness, it is kind of annoying sometimes. But that obsession with going, yeah, conventional wisdom says X, which is why I'm going to throw it out of the window. And we can take that too far, by the way. I mean, we can, actually, there are occasional cases where, I mean, even then, okay, I said I don't know about Dyson. We don't know really, in a way, in advance. So the most extraordinary thing you'll ever hear is one of the most extraordinary ad campaigns of the last 20 years was effectively Ronseal. It does exactly what it says on the tin. Okay. Now Steve Henry, get him on the podcast, by the way. He said that the night before, the night they were sitting in the agency, the night that was going to go out, and does everybody know it? Okay, it basically goes quick Ronseal quick drying wood stain is a wood stain that dries quickly, and then it showed a bloke. They had a client who insisted on having the product in shot for 90% of the ad. So basically, they wrote this absurd bit of copy around it, which just goes, "It's a wood seal. It dries quickly. It's called quick drying wood seal. It does exactly what it says on the tin." Now, by the way, everybody knows that phrase. It's used. It's entered the English language. It'll be in the Oxford Dictionary of Quotations. In fact, when they tried to actually trademark the phrase, the barrister they first went to said, "Don't be ridiculous. You can't trademark a phrase that's in common parlance." And they said, "It's not in common parlance by chance. We invented it." The guy said, "Don't be ridiculous. People have been saying that for years. It does exactly what it says on the tin." But of course, it had to come from somewhere. Now, Steve Henry was sitting with a bunch of colleagues in the office the night that went out and basically said, "We're just going to be a laughingstock, the entire industry," because it was, it was such an absurd ad in some ways. In advance, it seemed such a ridiculous thing to do. And he just said, "Okay, we've really jumped the shark this time, effectively. The entire industry is just going to ridicule us. We won't be able to show our faces in Soho for years." And of course, it's kind of a brilliant ad. Out of necessity, out of a whole mixture of things, it's kind of fabulous. And if any of us can get a phrase into the English language, into common use, in our lifetime, we can pretty much retire, I think, can't we? That would be for any copywriter. And they really did that.
I was going to say, it's one of those things where you always hark back and think, oh, was it a thing? But that sounds like a situation where they genuinely don't know. Something would have been in their minds to surely have thought, maybe there's something. Or is it the idea? Do you still have that innocence? Is it still possible to have that innocence in today's modern marketplace where there is this kind of uber awareness of being ironic or being silly, to be able to go, I don't know if this is going to work, guys, but let's try it. How do you get that freedom?
No, because I suppose one of my favourite ads they did, Citrus Spring, where they just had the client. Does anyone remember that? It was locked off, shot on video, and it just had a bloke in a tie saying, who was the real client, saying, I want to see my advertising agency to tell them about new Citrus Spring, which is a new drink from Britvic. They said, great, we're going to need a 2-week shoot in a fruit plantation in the Bahamas and a catchy reggae jingle. I said, will you tell them that it contains a refreshing mixture of sparkling spring water and pure fruit juice? And they said, if you're going to be clever, Bob, you can do the ad yourself. So here I am, okay? That was the ad. Now, maybe they didn't run it enough, in fairness, because they ran Ronseal a lot. I always thought that was absolutely breaking the fourth wall. Now, you can argue, some of my colleagues said it's too much of an in-joke. It's very funny if you work in advertising. It's not so funny if you're a punter. I don't quite agree. I think everybody now knows that filmmakers are behind film. I'm not sure we can really... It's a complicated one, that. And anybody a direct mail copywriter here? Do people believe it's a letter or not is a really interesting question. Because for a long time, a lot of people did. A lot of people would get a bit of direct mail and they'd write back. So it's always dangerous to play with that kind of, illusion stuff.
There's a weird, I mean, I've obviously written a lot of direct mail. There's a weird suspension of disbelief that goes on, that you are there with the reader, that of course, when you say, dear reader, you're going into this world where it's like, I'm obviously not writing to you, but you create that world. But there's also, and I've always been interested by that, where, because a lot of people will talk about tone of voice and stuff like that. In the direct mail world, I don't know how much of that exists, because you're in this weird moment where it's you're accepting that this is a letter. When you then in that world, it went to VSLs, a video sales letter, which was even more preposterous.
Yeah, of course.
There's a slideshow that in the early days of using those, we would use them in Agora. We were making them on PowerPoint and just putting the copy on the thing. But there is this suspension of disbelief, and I always find it interesting. I do talk about authenticity.
That's actually quite an interesting idea for a financial product, actually.
Well, I think it
didn't
works because you're giving information, and
Yeah.
you're providing information with people, and as long as you provide that suspension of disbelief. But then essentially in all advertising, we sit there and we watch Coronation Street. I don't watch Coronation Street, but nothing wrong with people who do. But there is. That's my opinion. I don't know why I'm trying to be nice. It's a terrible program. But if you're sat there watching Coronation Street,
it's very funny, fellas. Yeah.
but you're sat there and then there's an advert break. Now we know that's an advert, but it's how much do you spend the time worrying about that, because there is a suspension of disbelief with the viewer that's going to go, oh, actually, do you know what? No, I do fancy that Kit Kat. I do fancy that thing. It's a weird tightrope, I think, we walk as copywriters to how much do you play into that and how much do you ease off, kind of thing, because it could destroy you if you suddenly go, hang on a minute, this is all bollocks, like why am I even writing this? But that suspension of disbelief, I think, is probably at the key of copywriting.
But I think Howell Henry, and I've always got the vague idea that if you were in advertising in the 90s, you were either a Howell Henryite or a BBHite. There were these two camps. And I like them both. But deep down, personally, from the stuff I like to do, I was a Howell Henryite. And of course, their interesting methodology, which was you had a parallel team of planner, account man, I think it was media guy and creative team, who worked on the whole thing in parallel. And that meant you could, if you came up with a particularly weird idea early on, the creative team could kind of hijack the process a bit, which, by the way, I don't think is necessarily wrong. I don't think the production of creative work is a linear process. That's what you do in a factory when you want to produce the same thing time and time again. If you want to produce something new, and the analogy I always use with that is that it's actually slightly unfortunate now, isn't it? I was going to talk about Michael Jackson happily, of course, and of course my great mate Jimmy Savile used to say, no. I suddenly realised I'm being caught by, but they weren't allowed. The Jackson 5 and Michael Jackson, in the early days of Motown, weren't allowed to write songs. Because the whole Motown process was you had songwriters in a room, you had recording studios, you had bands, and they go, okay, we've just come up with this song, Dancing in the Street, Studio 3's free, can you get Martha and the Vandellas, okay? Right? And the whole thing was modelled on the Detroit production line of car manufacturing, because it was a Detroit business, and Berry Gordy basically took exactly the same efficiencies. Now, the interesting thing is that the truth of the matter is, if you look at music, right, the best songwriters are often singer-songwriters. Now, logically, that shouldn't happen, should it? The Beatles shouldn't be good at both singing songs and writing them, okay? They should be separate crafts. And nowadays, of course, increasingly they are, aren't they, with auto-tune and bloody X Factor and all this bollocks. But nonetheless, I think various people, I think it might have been Stevie Wonder and Michael Jackson, if I'm right, were frustrated because the rule was you either performed or you wrote the songs. And if you tried to write, and in the same way, I don't think you should prevent copywriters or art directors from inputting into strategy at all, because they have an idea of what works by being closer to what you might call the final, where the rubber touches the road. Okay, that a strategist can never have. And you can just go, look, your strategy is fine, but it makes sense, but it will lead to work that's kind of meh. Whereas if we just put this complete spin on it, I know we can produce something that's kind of amazing.
I've been trying to figure out, as a very casual hobby, why is the bad copy in the world? Like, why is the bad advertising wise the best stuff. And I asked people, I remember asking Ryan Wallman, and he raised the idea of often it's by committee. But then when you speak about the idea of this separation between talents, to say a nice word, I recently worked with an agency and a creative director there, and it was brilliant to be able to speak so openly about the whole thing. And it just reminded me of being like hired as the copy guy or what have you. And it's just, I'm starting to realize the reason there is bad advertising here is because we even in this building now, I've sat here watching people come and go, and there'll be all the different sections and the account managers and we don't truly speak to ourselves as much as we should.
The other thing actually, which is worse than bad copy, is the absence of copy. Which is, if you think about it, even bad copy probably conveys some information. Even if you don't read it. Now this sounds like a really appalling argument, but I think there's some truth in it, which is that there's a psychological... So when a person first told me this, I went, oh, for God's sake, I really have drunk the Kool-Aid here, if I believe this. But their idea was the psychological value of unread copy, which is it visually says that you have something to say. Okay? There's something newsworthy about this product because you've bothered to write 300 words about it, even if nobody reads the words. Now, I'd also argue that the people who will read the words are the people who are undecided about the thing, and they're the people you most need to reach. So if you can turn a 2-second press ad into a 2-minute press ad for free, why wouldn't you do that? Okay? It's not like anybody was forced to read it. Okay? Now, cash if you die, cash if you don't, which is a great direct marketing line. That was accompanied by 400 words of pretty intelligent copy. Now, there are a whole lot of products, it drives me nuts, which had we been in the 1970s, CDP would have taken the product, they would have done a double-page spread in the Sunday Times colour magazine, they would have had an extremely witty headline, they would have had 300 words of incredibly funny copy, written by someone very clever, and you ended that up by going, shit, I really want one of those things, okay? Drayton Bird did an extraordinary ad for, now this is really weird, okay, the first LCD digital watch. Now, for the young folks, very early digital watches were LED, and you had to press a button, and then the time appeared in red on a black background, and then after 10 seconds it went off again, okay? And then they had the LCD one where the time was always on, and they added stopwatch and alarm functions. Now, okay, this sounds like total shit to you, doesn't it, because you're young. But you've got to remember that you only had a stopwatch and an alarm if you went and bought some Swiss thing for $3,000. That was an incredible thing to have on your watch in 1970, whatever it was. And Drayton Bird did a double-page spread to sell it, where he basically reproduced, although better written, the entire instruction manual for the watch. And it told you how you could set the stopwatch, how you zeroed the stopwatch, how you could take a lap time, how you could set the alarm, how you could choose AM or PM, how you could choose an alarm that was Monday to Friday. I'm not sure it was actually clever enough to do that. It might have just been a daily alarm, okay? So by the time you'd read the whole ad, you actually knew how to work one of these watches. Bear in mind, it's loads of stuff like, to zero the stopwatch, you hold down one button and press the other one, okay? And so you almost felt, well, now I've spent all this time learning how to use this watch, I feel a bit of a prat not actually owning one, right? Okay? And, I mean, it was an extraordinary thing, unbelievably successful. And I never realised Drayton had written it when I started working for him. And I said, you have no fucking idea how much I wanted that watch when I first read that ad. Bear in mind, it was something insane, like it was probably 120 quid in 1970, which is like a 500, it was painfully expensive. As a kid, you wouldn't have one. There was one kid in my school for a whole year, there was one kid in my school who had an LCD digital watch, and everybody used to demand to see it. Ooh, the time stays on the whole time. Okay, okay. Now, the really interesting thing there is, there are products, one of the products we have, and it drives me nuts, the Philips air fryer. Has anybody got one?
No,
yeah, exactly. Do you agree it's the best thing you've ever bought in your entire... Well, that's probably going... It's fantastic, isn't it? Yeah, it's utterly fabulous. So you fry food without oil, you put stuff into a sort of frying basket, fish, chips, whatever it is you want to, inverted commas, fry. You put a tiny drop of olive oil in just to create the scent of fried food, and then it blitzes it with superheated air. So you get basically the taste and crispiness of fried food with no fat. Okay? It's a fucking miracle product. Now, In Japan, apparently everybody has, you know, in Asia, they're really, really universal. But it is utterly brilliant, isn't it? And I go, this thing deserves, you know, a double-page CDP ad with a funny headline and 400 words so people go, shit, that's really clever. Okay? And then they've got the statistics to back it up, like Belgians who know a lot about chips, right? Okay?
I apologise to the Belgian audience of this podcast.
Yeah, no. The Belgians know a lot about chips. Mayonnaise thing's a bit pervy, but we'll park that for a second, okay? Okay. By the way, if you ever want to go down to the southwest of France, on the this is my point about websites forcing everybody to do the same thing by applying the same search criteria. It's like recruitment. This whole business of graduate recruitment is becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's a nonsense. It's creating a total racket out of higher education. You know, it's become a signalling game, not really. It's lost contact with what you might call education in its proper sense. Anyway, don't get me started, okay? But this business of forcing everybody to go through the same procedure in order to assess something, whether it's education or whether it's train websites. And they'll always say, if you want to go to Bordeaux, you want to go to Poitiers, you want to go to Marseille, whatever it is, they'll always basically say, go into Paris, change station in Paris, and take another train. Now, that does save you 40 minutes, but it's a total pain in the arse. If you get off at Lille, and typically there'll be an hour and a half wait, a train will leave the same station for the southwest of France or Marseille or Bordeaux or Poitiers without you having to get a taxi, without you having to get your luggage on the metro, without you having to cross Paris in a whole heap of chaos. And okay, it takes a bit longer, but you've got an hour and a half to wait in Lille, and opposite Lille station there's a place called Le Palais de la Bière, which is a bar dedicated to beer and chips, okay? Has anybody been there? It's utterly fantastic, because you've got the best of Flemish beers and chips, and I'm not making this up, a thing called un Welsh complet. Has anybody had one? It's the French equivalent of Welsh rabbit, and they call it un Welsh. And un Welsh complet is, of course, with egg as well, and basically then they melt the cheese over chips as well as the bread. So it's fucking fantastic, okay?
But let me ask you, could you do that same meal in an air fryer?
You probably could, actually. I think, yeah, exactly, yeah.
Because
So
when they get to that stage, you're sorted. But
it's very interesting. In every room, there's always one air fryer person. And when I said this in New York, one person knew what I was talking about, and she said, I bought 4. And she bought one for her dad, one for... They're really good presents, by the way, because... Of course, yeah, absolutely right. Now, copy would solve that problem and would basically, most people who spent 2 minutes reading about the air fryer, essentially the way to look at it is that it's a microwave in reverse. In other words, all the things that microwaves are shit at, it's good at, okay? So it's essentially a perfect complement, as you all know, not compliment, because you're copywriters, okay? A perfect complement to a microwave.
well, I was looking for somewhere to finish this podcast.
But nobody writes.
And little did I
Why
know.
can't you produce an ad which has 300 words in it? You do that, exactly. Thank God
Little
for
did
that.
I know the end of this advert, this podcast will become an advert. They are available, air fryers, in Morrison's on offer. I saw them the other night when I was there with Ruth. My best friends got one and they enjoy them.
Yeah.
They've enjoyed it. They've made me some potato chips in it. I mean, I've been looking for a sponsor for the podcast.
Yeah, Philips air fryer. Yeah.
I think we've found it. Rory, it's getting on, so I will draw an end to proceedings. Thank you so much for your time. Could everybody give Rory specifically a beautiful round of applause?
Thank you very much.
I'll shake your hand.
What a pleasure. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you for all you do as well.
Thank you.
Absolutely fabulous.
Thank you to everyone, as I say, for coming along. It's been absolutely wonderful, and this little boy from Grimsby is moved by your love and care. Thank you so much. I'm going to be around because I've got a night off, so I can drink, which is great. There's a insane, like, Toy Story-esque bar there. You'll see why it's Toy Story-esque, because there's like these weird steps that make you feel tiny, like a teddy bear.
I never thought of that, but you're
Yeah,
obviously right.
it had that effect to it when I just saw it. So I'm going to go up there for a beer, and then I'll probably end up in Doggett's, because that's where me and Ben used to drink years ago, and once got told off when we had a too long a drink. But yeah, we'll be around.
God,
Thank
tell me
you
how you
so
got
much.
told off.
Oh, it was a copywriter started drinking shots.
Always a bad sign, yeah.
And it was a really nice conversation. Ben will back me up here. We were having a chat and everybody was getting on, but then we took it too far. and the only boss that was left in the office was my boss, who normally was nice, but we all got back and we were a little bit squiffy. I've used the word squiffy in a podcast, which is...
that is fantastic, well done.
But we were all a bit squiffy, and he felt he had to, and he'll admit to this, he felt he had to show his authority, I think, and told everyone off. But then another copywriter accidentally emailed him saying, oh, he's being a dickhead. And then he replied to him going, oh, yeah, no, I think you meant to send this to the rest of everybody. It was a terrible time. We think about it often. I've shed many tears over the thought of it, and I apologise to the man if he's listening to this. But yeah, anyway. But thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Let's have a drink, have a booze. Thank you. Thanks very much, mate.